Love it. Okay, cool. So, man, there's so much happening at the moment. And so this morning, what I'm preaching on in Mark in chapter 14, and we're going through the Garden of Gethsemane. And I was just standing over here and I was thinking, you know what, it's like the Bible is, you could just about sum it up with two gardens. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, through disobedience, through a disconnection with God, through not leaning into God, through not believing in Him, they find this, they end up falling and take all humanity with them in this fall. And yet here in the Garden of Gethsemane, here's the Lord, and He's pressing into God. And he has unbelief all around him, but he's pressing in with God. And through this building, and here's where he wins humanity back to God. And it's everything that was lost in Eden is gained again. I know it happens on the cross, and I know, through the resurrection, and also, but it's here that the battle was won, that he could be obedient. Through disobedience, Adam and Eve lose it. Through obedience, Jesus wins it. Thank you, brother. I was working in the shed yesterday, actually, and I didn't realize how dehydrated I got. Man, I drank water like nothing, and I've been drinking it this morning. And last night when I was here doing a sermon, and man, I just drank and drank. So I'm still feeling dehydrated. So if my mouth goes on me, I do apologize. I'm going to it's like a national, right now we have a national state of emergency in New Zealand. It doesn't feel like it for us, does it? If you lived in Hawke's Bay, you lived in some of those places, it feels like a national state of emergency. Here for us, we look out the window and we wonder what's going on. It's sunny, it's this and that. What are we going to do this afternoon? And the sun's shining, you've got a million opportunities. We're not thinking national emergency. Here with the disciples, it's like a global emergency. It's like a global crisis. If Jesus doesn't go through with this, billions of human beings will never have the opportunity to be reconciled to the Lord. And yet they sleep through it. It's not something they can pick. So I'm going to read from Mark 14, 32 to 42. They went to a place called Gethsemane. Excuse me, sorry. They went to a place called Gethsemane. And Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said. He said to them, "Stay here and keep watch." Going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible, the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." Then he returned to his disciples and he found them sleeping. Simon. This is the first time Jesus called him Simon since about chapter 2. Peter means rock. He's not been a rock. He calls him Simon. You can miss things easily. There is a weight in it. Do you know that when we get taken out, you can revert back to who you were very, very quickly. You can begin to rely on the flesh for strength. And he calls him his given name, not the name Jesus gave him, Simon. He said to Peter, "Are you asleep? Couldn't you keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak." Once more he went away and he prayed the same thing. And when he came back again, he found them sleeping because their eyes were heavy. They did not know what to say to him. Returning the third time, he said to them, "Are you still sleeping and resting? Enough, the hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. Just as he was speaking, Judas, one of the 12, appeared, and with him was a crowd armed with swords and clubs and sent from the chief priests, the teachers of the law, and the elders. Now the betrayer had arranged a signal with them. The one eye kisses the man. Arrest him and lead him away under guard. Going at once to Jesus, Judas said, Rabbi, and kissed him. The men seized Jesus and arrested him. Then one of those standing near drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest, cutting off his ear. John tells us that this was Peter. Am I leading a rebellion, Jesus said, that you have come out with swords and clubs to capture me? Every day I was with you, teaching in the temple courts, and you did not arrest me. But the scriptures must be fulfilled, that everyone deserted him and fled. A young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus, and when they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind. So I just want to break down a few things here, and deeply distressed here is how it's been translated in the NIV. If you get into the Greek, it's more like absolutely astonished that when Jesus was realizing the gravity of the situation, he knew he was going to die. He knew he was going to die back in the temple when he turned over, when he caused such commotion, and when he accused the Pharisees and the Sadducees and pointed out the corruption. He knew his time was coming. He told, as we've preached through, he talked to the disciples, he'd said, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to be handed over. But then in the situation when it's all happened, when it all kicks in, it's like, now he can see. Now this is what I have to face. And it's the wrath of God to be poured out on him. Wrath is it's an interesting word, but basically it's anger. Basically, people can have wrath too. God can have wrath, but only God's wrath is a just and holy wrath. We don't always have that. Very rarely have that. I mean, we can be holy in our anger towards a certain thing, but then we can get fixated on it, and it becomes almost an idol to try and fix us or smash it or do whatever it is, We can go sideways fast, but God's wrath is always holy, and it's always just, because he's a holy and he's a just God. And so the wrath that was going to be put on Jesus, the enormity of what he knew. See, there's temptation in this garden too. He could have gone, Jesus could have fled. It was dark. He could have got out. But when they come, and when the soldiers come, and the Judas, and there was opportunity. I think it's in Luke. He also quotes about how when Jesus spoke to the soldiers, they all fell backwards, and they did it twice. He could have walked away, but in it he didn't. See, because the kingdom that Jesus has, the kingdom of God, is not fought with spears and swords. So spears and swords are never going to take it down. It's a kingdom that's in our hearts. It's a kingdom that changes us from the inside out. It's a kingdom where if you want to be changed, you can't do that by running. You will never change if you run and walk away, even from the most difficult of situations. And it's interesting even in here that, see, it says that Jesus was in this anguish, he was astonished. Troubled could actually be better translated as with overcome with horror. That was the condition. Now we can read in history, if you've ever read Fox's Book of Martyrs, I don't know why you'd want to read it. I've got it, it's on my shelf, so if you feel that predisposed, to cheer yourself up through somebody else's agony, then Fox's Book of Martyrs will help you do that. You know, some people had what they were praying for at faith when they were being burnt at the stake was for a bag of gunpowder to be tied around their neck. They saw that as God's mercy, that they could get down to the flame, that it would happen quicker. Polycarp, one of the church fathers, early church fathers, I believe he was a disciple of John the Apostle. And so he held a lot of weight because he was a disciple of one of the last apostles to live. John was the last one to die. And he was they referred to him as the Bishop of Smyrna, which is a place in nowadays Turkey, Izmir. And so in this, Polycarp, I think he lived to about 86 years old, something like that. And but he got accused of many things. And as he was, they tried to run him away and hide him. He said, "No, God's given me a dream and a vision. I know I'm going to be burned." So he might as well just let the Roman soldiers in. So he opened the door and he let him in. He went away again. His friends had a way to smuggle him out and everything else. He said, "No, I've got to do it." So he went to the magistrate. The magistrate in the morning was, he questioning him, doing all these things, and said, "Don't you know we could do this?" And he threatened apparently to throw him to the beast, to do this, to do that, to burn him. And his answer was, "Well, the fire you're threatening me with lasts for about an hour. But the fire of the coming judgment, you don't know, and you don't know anything of it, and it is never consumed." Like it's never ending. So do what you will. And apparently he got taken away and was straight away, and it was burnt on a fire. It also says that he actually didn't burn to death on the fire, and they put a spear in him in the end. Some people face death very bravely. You read the Book of Martyrs, and many of them faced it bravely. And there's something here that Mark wants us to get. See, John didn't mention it. John hardly mentions what he mentions in the book of John about all that he was praying for us, and the prayer that went on with Jesus and the discourse with the disciples before the garden. And then he just goes straight into he was arrested. Whereas Mark wants us to know. Luke tells us that he prayed, he collapsed, and he prayed like drops of blood. And sweat came off him like great drops of blood. I'm not going to get into all the medical conditions because I didn't study that up, but I've heard that can happen with great anxiety and great anguish. I don't know if it's to do with blood vessels or whatever, I'm not sure. Under pressure, I don't know. But apparently I heard Morris preach on it, so that's good enough for me. See, Luke 22, verses 43 to 44 says, "An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat were like drops of blood falling to the ground." So in this, you see, it's like here's God's wrath coming on him. And but we know of God as this loving God. And then, so how do we get this God of wrath, and then there's this God of love? Is God schizophrenic? How could he do that to his child? But the thing is, you have to find that actually, because God is so loving, therefore there is wrath. When God creates us and he loves us so much, and sin is rampant, of course he's going to be angry. That's what for any of us that are parents, we love our children and we can be angry with them, but that doesn't mean to say we don't love them. That anger can become carnal, and we have to ask for forgiveness for that. But generally, to be, I think sometimes parents are too disassociated with, we hear it, don't we, about children being out and doing ram raids at 12 or 13-year-old, and parents don't know where they are. And The question is, don't those parents love those children enough to be angry and do something about it? Because of love. Because they should have more love. And here's the Father, it's because of love. It's not in spite of it. It's because of his love that his wrath has to be poured out. And Jesus is saying in here, like it's quite incredible, Lord, if you can take this cup from me. The answer is, son, if I take the cup from you, billions will be lost. And I love you. And you've never sinned. And you've been faithful. But this is the way it's got to go. I find that incredibly deep. I just can't, I still can't get my head around the grace of God. You sing a song about God's grace, I'll sing it all day long. It is incredible. His grace meaning unmerited favor. Like, wow. And Jesus said, your will be done. I find that incredible. Abba Father in chapter 14, verse 36. Abba Father said, everything's possible. Take this cup, yet not what. Abba, it's where Jesus calling him daddy, calling him an affectionate term. So Mark 14, verse 41. Returning the third time, he said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Enough, the hour has come. Look, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of sinners. Let us go. Here comes my betrayer. It's like Jesus has been to them. This is the third time now, and they are still sleeping. And I don't know, Ian had something, he said just a couple of weeks ago, he was sharing about when he was up north and on that course up at Rotorua with he and his son, and he met that pastor up there, and that pastor had cancer, and he had cancer 4 times, brain cancer 4 times with the treatment. And he said that when you go and pray for people, you need to pray out loud. People need to hear what you're praying, because often when they get into that place, they don't know what to pray themselves. They don't know how to help themselves out. They don't know what they are allowed to believe. They don't know should they have hope or should they not have hope? Should they resign to the fact that they could die, or you imagine if you'd gone to hospital and the doctors have taken a biopsy and it looks grim, like that's why they've done a biopsy. And then you're waiting for this result. And what do you do? Do you steel yourself? Do you steady yourself for the very worst outcome? Or do you have hope? Is it both? What are you hanging on to? There's very often in the kingdom of God, there's 2 things happening simultaneously. What's the thing to do? And people need to hear you to pray through. And that's what helping keep watch looks like. See, to keep watch, what does keep watch look like? When I was working on a farm, the boss, when he'd go away on holiday, and one time he went away for 6 weeks, and it was like, well, keep an eye on the place. What do I keep an eye out for? Well, I don't know. You'll know it when you see it. That's, just keep an eye out. Keep an eye out, watch out for the neighbours. I worked on a farm. Man, they were tight for money. That was when I went up to Culverton. And as a cadet, you weren't allowed to talk to the neighbours. You weren't allowed to do this. You weren't allowed to do that. You weren't all that kind of stuff. You were just there to work. That's it. Do you know what happens when you work? You just do what you're told to do. You don't do much extra. When I went to Rakaia Gorge, it was like another family. It was like, do not drive down the road and past a neighbour and don't say good day, and not stop to say good day if they're there working on the side of the road, because you never know when they need you or when you need them. They came from it. They were all ex-army, rehab blocks, because big stations were cut up into smaller blocks. And so they learned in the trenches how to rely on one another. It was completely different. So it was like, keep watch. There's something just we know for some of us on the prayer chain and different things. Beth's sister, Katie, over in Melbourne, has been suffering cancer, and it's a return of cancer that she had chemo for, and the chemo that's been coming this time around. So she had chemo, it all disappeared, she was clear. Was it for a couple of years? And now it's come back, and now the chemo for it it's a year-long program, and it's just devastating. And there's only a couple of good days. It's like a fortnight cycle, and there's only a couple of 3 days that are good days every fortnight. That's all she's got to look forward to. Saying about when she dropped the kids off and she's hearing mums talking about, the local malls, this, that, or whatever, and she just can't stand the conversations. She wants to be there at school to pick up her kids, but she's got real life issues. Real life issues. And so we've been praying for her. So this is about just keeping watch. You don't know what you're looking for. I didn't know how to pray for Katie. God, what are you saying about Katie? And so I was in my office the other day, and through the summer, my office is in that southwest corner of the building. It seems to attract blowflies like nothing else, and I don't know if there's anything there, but they just came in the back door, and you can hear them coming. They just come down to my end of the office, and so I got a can of fly spray sitting on my desk. And I love spraying blowflies, because being on a farm, you see what they do to sheep and this and that and everything else. I've learnt to hate blowflies with a vengeance. And when they come in and they get when they fly right into it, and then you hear, it's in about 20 seconds, you hear the clutch start slipping. They change down about 3 or 4 gears. They bounce. It's like therapy. They're bouncing off walls. If they hit the fluorescent light, which seems to attract them, it's got a real ring to it, They drop down onto the coffee table. They do a little break dance, and then they're off again and bounce off walls, and it's like, yahoo, Well, the other day, this wasp came in, and being a guy, I just I like the challenge of a wasp. I like to, like that, without getting stung, so it's sort of thing. But this thing it landed. There's a possibility, believe me, you can get stung. It's not foolproof. That's why fools do it, I suppose. But anyway, this thing lands on my blind. And I got this can of Black Flag there, and I thought, man, if it starts pinging off the walls, I could end up sort of, and I just sprayed it, give it a go, and it just fell straight down dead, bang. And I felt the Lord say, I want you to stop what you're doing and pray for Katie right now. That the power of my blood will do to that cancer what that Black Flag did to that wasp. Pray like that. And that's what I prayed. Because God will bring things to you in the little things of every day. God is in the little things. We're looking for whatever it might be. But if we tune into where He is and learn how to keep watch, and because you have other people in mind, and because of your heart towards whatever it is and towards God's kingdom, He will alert you. And whatever He wants you to do, you'll know it when you see it. And it took a dead wasp to cue me in. Very satisfying experience, that dead wasp, I've got to add. it cues you in. You know, I went in, my daughter got prayed at, our oldest daughter, Tara, who many of you won't know because we have 3 children, married, kids, grandkids, living here in Oxford. But our oldest daughter, Tara, moved into Christchurch at about 18, and she'll be 38 or 39, so she's been there 20-odd years. So, but she got prayed in as a pastor at St Albans Baptist Church, as a children's and families pastor, which we're very proud of. She's a couple of days a week. It's St Albans' first pastor, children's pastor that they've ever had, and so we're really proud of her. But you know, as a parent, you worry a little bit, but there you go. And Paul Edlin, who's a friend of mine, he's the senior pastor, he's interim, and he goes, and he says that, see, in Ecclesiastes, he preached from this, so I just want to steal a part of what he preached on Sunday. From Ecclesiastes 9:11, this is Solomon. He says, I've seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. So I'm going to do that again. The race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise or wealth to the brilliant or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. Now that word chance is generally translated as opportunity. So time and opportunity come to every single one of us. The disciples had an opportunity to do something really astonishing, to do something that would just blow our minds. Here is Jesus facing the biggest trial of his life, to be obedient to the Father's will that is going to cost him his own personal life, to be tortured to death, a horrendous death, on our behalf. These guys could have gathered round and they could have just like, Lord, we're with you. What is it we need to do? Can we bring you food? We'll walk with you. We know they're going to arrest you. Where do you want us to be? And Jesus has said to them, pray that you won't fall into temptation. It turns out that the temptation that happened was to actually run. When you run, you will not gain anything. There are times when you get out of the way and you take cover. I know there's fight and flight and all that. Not always fighting will win the day either. You simply have to do what Jesus is asking you to do. And if you can be obedient in those small, simple things, then it'll happen. And here, the disciples had an opportunity to really stand out, and yet they completely blew it. They were asleep. Sleeping spiritually really means like to stop praying, can be to be completely unaware of trials or to refuse them, to even know there's a trial, but to refuse to acknowledge it as God's will. Blaming the flesh. Hey, spirit's willing, but my flesh is weak. So, hey, everybody suffers that. You can check out on that. Excuse me. So here they are, and they've checked out. And when they came and they gathered up Jesus, they took off in every different direction. The last one took off not even wearing anything. He might have been the bravest that hung around the longest, or got closest to the soldiers. I don't know. Scripture also talks about how Peter with the sword and striking off the air, we heard that here in Mark, but I think it's Luke points it out that it was Peter or John did. But it was, see, It was a woman, and we don't even know her name, poured a bottle of perfume over Jesus, knowing what was going to happen. Jesus had told them what was going to happen. It was a man we'd never even heard of. Now we know his name is Simon. That he got pulled in and carried the cross because the Lord was tortured so badly he couldn't get the distance from where he was tried and punished to Golgotha. Joy and I have walked that road, or at least they think it's the road. You go to Jerusalem, it's very hard to tell what's what at times because, hey, this happened here, they just want you to get into a shop and buy something off the street where Jesus was crucified type of thing, you know. And so it's hard to know what's what, but Pilate's court was pretty stunning to be there. But someone else carried his cross. The disciples could have found a tomb. It was an unknown man we'd never even heard of that found his tomb and put him in it. They could have done something with his body, but it was the woman that came and did something with his body. They could have declared at the crucifixion, had they been there, it was mainly women at the crucifixion. There was only one or two others, men. But mainly them. They could have declared who he really was. It took a Roman centurion to say, this is the Son of the living God. Surely this is the Son of the living God. They could have gone down and remembered and held in faith had they been praying that Jesus said he would come back. He said he would go ahead of them to Galilee, that would meet them there. They knew everything, but it was the woman who ran down to the tomb, and then they were the ones, Mary Magdalene and so on, that Jesus was risen. And when they went back and said, Peter and those didn't even believe. Sometimes, and this is one of those places, you can miss it, and it's actually catastrophic. Could be. It could be catastrophic if you stay in that place. If you stay in that place of, man, I missed it, and nothing can fix it. It can be like that. And Jesus said, I just want to check what he said actually to make sure I've got that right, is that in Matthew 14:41, returning the third time, he said to them, are you still sleeping and resting? Enough, the hour has come. This word enough, the Greek translation for it is, it's kind of, it's hard to get your head around, but it's like the book is closed. The accounts are finished. That is the end. But now the hour has come. So enough, like I've prayed through, what's going to happen now is going to happen. And I'm able to face it with my Father. I'm going there. And that's it. So now the hour has come. So what's the hour has come? Well, it's the hour of darkness. And then he says this thing, rise, let's go. So enough, your catastrophic failure now is over, right? And so what does God say? Jesus say, but it's all right because it's this and it's that and everything that pops it up. No, he doesn't. What does he say? Rise, let's go. He gives us the next thing to do. Whenever you feel stuck, whenever you feel like you've missed it, and many of us will feel, but because remember, time and opportunity come to everybody. It comes to every man and every woman. And you may get to a place where you feel like you've missed it. Man, if I could turn the clock back, if I could do such and such, if I could just, people say, like if I had my life all over again, I wouldn't change this thing. If I had my life all over again, I'd change 90% of it. That's true. There are parts, yes, I've learned through suffering, I've learned through all those kinds of things, but I've had the opportunity to change it. I'd like to change a lot of my dumb mistakes. I'd like to change a lot of my dumb attitude at times. There's a whole lot of things I'd like to change because all those things had consequences. But Jesus says, come and do that. Just come and follow me. There was the next thing to do. But they blew that because then they parted and they ran. But Jesus, even after that in resurrection, gathers them together. They're in a room. He just gives you the next thing to do. You must be able to get on the front foot. Grief will cause you to camp in misery. You'll be playing violins forever. Like little ones. I don't mean to be too scathing here because people do go through real grief. I understand that. But there has to be a time that you move through it. Abraham's father, I can't remember his name now. Can someone, is it, sorry? Terah? Yeah, Terah. Thank you, Peter. And he had another son, Abraham's brother, but he died. Was it start with H? I can't remember what it was, but Abraham's father comes with Abraham on this journey, but Abraham's brother had died. And when Abraham's father comes to a city that has the same name as his son that died, he remained there and he didn't go any further. And I remember a sermon on how grief, when it causes you to camp, when you find comfort in grief, that's the ceiling, that's it. We've got to be able to move past it. It's not that we forget what happened, and it's not that we forget the pain, we can acknowledge that. But it can't be in a place where it holds us there. First Kings has got this stunning story. Elijah has just seen the prophets of Baal and Ashtaroth, about 900 of them slaughtered, and now Isabel and Ahab are after him, and probably got armies coming up, and he's freaked out, and he's over it. He's been serving God with all his heart. He's got a stunning ministry. It's an incredible miracle ministry. And to have fire come down from heaven and burn up the altar and all that kind of thing that happened. It's been amazing. But now Jezebel and that's after him. I'm just going to pick it up in verse 1 to 9. Now Ahab told Jezebel everything Elijah had done and how he killed the prophets with the sword. So Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah to say, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow I don't make your life like that of one of them." And Elijah, remember in the book of James, and everybody held Elijah as like this amazing prophet, a man who never died, a man who God called up into heaven. He never faced death. But James says, he reminds us that Elijah was a man just like us. And you can read it that he's a man just like Elijah was afraid and he ran for his life. And when he came to Bathsheba in Judah, he left his servant there. And while he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, he came to a broom bush. He sat down under it and he prayed that he might die. "I've had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors." And it sounds like a pastor's cluster group. Then he lay down under the bush and he fell asleep. And all at once an angel touched him and said, "Get up and eat." He looked around and there by his head was some bread baked over hot coals and a jar of water. He ate and drank and then he lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Get up and eat, for the journey's too much for you." So he got up and ate and drank. Strengthened by that food, he traveled 40 days and 40 nights until he reached Horeb, the mountain of God. There he went into a cave and spent the night. And that's where he hears the still small voice and so on. I've been reading a book, My Utmost for His Highest. A guy called Oswald Chambers. I've probably already mentioned him to you, but it's a devotional book. And every day the readings and so on, they just astound me. He's not trying to give you a good day. He's trying to cut you in half. And in it he's saying, I just love what he mentioned with Elijah here, because Oswald Chambers is very much about, like in The Wasp, it's in the present. And he was saying, here's Elijah and he's looking for God, and where is God? As soon as where is he? Well, actually, what happens? And he said depression can be a normal thing. Sadness, grief, it can be a normal thing that happens to a person. But maybe you didn't see the test in it. Maybe you didn't see this, that, whatever it might be. But take your eyes off it. If you try to fix depression by doing something to fix depression, when it doesn't work, you go deeper into depression. The way to get out of depression is to do whatever God tells you. And what he told Elijah to do was to get up and eat. Why? Because God was in the food. That's what he knew what Elijah needed. You're going to journey now for 40 days. But God is in the food. Man, did I love reading that. God, you're in food. But you see, here it is. It's in whatever he asks you to do. Whatever he asks you to do, he's in it. He's in it. And when you begin to obey, you go onto a different plane. You're not here on the ground anymore. Obedience takes you to somewhere else. And if you want to fight a bad day, just ask God, what is it? What is the smallest thing I could do? It might be ring your mother. It might be hold the line on something. It might be go and buy a box of something and give it to somebody and drop it in their letterbox or do something. But start getting into obedience and make obedience daily. Test yourself in this. Are you into daily obedience with the Lord? Is it like, are we hearing him in those small things? And a lot of it can be is that we don't recognize that he was in the food. God was in the food. That's what the small thing that he asked us to do changed Elijah, and off he went. And then you see what Elijah does following this is quite incredible. The disciples had a catastrophic failure. What happened? Get up, follow me now. They have another catastrophic failure. They all split. They do everywhere they're gone. What happens? Meet me in Galilee. Wait in Jerusalem. Wait there. Holy Spirit's going to come. And for all those that just simply obeyed and waited, wow, that just changed everything. Jesus had gone to the cross, and the punishment and the wrath that came upon his body because he was in human form paid the price that now our human body can now be filled with God's grace and the Holy Spirit. Our human body can now become a temple. It was an incredible battle. Wow. And God's power runs through us. If you're facing problems, may it be like that wasp. Some things look like blowflies, like to make a lot of noise for a long, long time and just keep all your attention. But wasp, death, where's your sting now? Where is it? I'd like to pray over you. It's 11:30, and maybe we can still, sorry, music team, would you like to come up? This will be a quick prayer. But I'll just give time for people, like if there's anything you want to hand over to the Lord, I just